Thanks, everyone. This is the first opportunity that I've had since Thursday in Parliament to address one specific issue, and that is the bare-knuckle fighting and the consideration around it that currently sits with the state government. Now, the Premier in Parliament on Thursday said he is not a fan of bare-knuckle fighting, yet in an extraordinary lack of leadership, wouldn't just rule it out and say, this is not going to happen on my watch in this state. It is absolutely clear there is no place for bare-knuckle fighting, organised bare-knuckle fighting in the Western Australian community. People don't want it. And I call on the Premier, show some leadership, come out and stamp it out. And I've got to say, if the Premier can organise a Perth-based rugby team, can build a racetrack, then the least he should be able to do is ban bare-knuckle fighting. Show some leadership, Premier, and get it done.
They seem to be giving the impression that it's all up to the Sports Commission. That's not right.
No, that's not right. That's not right. The Premier of Western Australia has within his powers to do what he thinks is necessary to keep the community safe and to uphold community expectations. It is very clear that bare-knuckle fighting, organised bare-knuckle fighting, two men in a ring with no gloves, boxing on with their bare fists is not acceptable in our community, and the Premier should step forward and ban it. He has said that he does not favour it himself. We've heard ministers say they do not favour it. So what on earth are they waiting for? Why can they build a racetrack? Why can they organise a rugby team, but they can't stop bare-knuckle fighting? It just simply does not pass any pub test whatsoever. And the Premier needs to step up, show some leadership and ban it.
Do you think bare-knuckle fighting kind of not necessarily endorses or promotes domestic violence, but kind of normalises?
Well, it doesn't. It's not a good look. Bare-knuckle fighting, organised bare-knuckle fighting, is not a good look for anybody. And we know from time to time in our community, we struggle to get on top of violence of all kinds. We've seen street brawls, we've seen one-punch attacks, we've seen domestic violence incidents. Nothing that anybody in our community favours, condones or wants to see promoted in any way, shape or form. So if there are organised bouts of bare-knuckle fighting, what sort of a message does that send? And again, I call on the Premier, please, use your leadership powers to step in and ban it. It's barbaric. It doesn't have a place in our modern community. It serves nobody at all. And what a shocking example it is for young men, young people, Western Australians generally. Let's stamp it out before it gets here.
There was a very similar rhetoric around MMA before it came to WA. What's the difference?
This is bare-knuckle fighting. This is two men in a ring with no gloves on, no protective padding, punching each other in the face. That's the difference.
The bare-knuckle fighting, even I think in the Commission will accept, is it only came in the last 4 or 5 years. It's only just it's coming out of something like MMA and UFC. Those other sports, boxing, MMA, they're all pretty well entrenched. You're not going to get rid of them. What they're doing is just introducing and opening another door to another sport. They don't have to do that.
That is my view. And to both of those points, it is not as though the section of the audience that have an appetite for this style of combat sport is not well served. There is MMA. There are other forms. This is a step too far, and it's a brutal step too far that sets a shocking example for people in our community, and in particular young men. I've got a son. He's nearly 8. I don't want him watching bare-knuckle fighting and thinking, oh, that's a career that I could pursue. I could climb into that ring and do that. It's just not something that people in our community want. And on Thursday in Parliament, this very question was raised directly to the Premier by our shadow spokesperson it was raised in the Parliament by our spokesperson for Sport and Recreation. The Premier said he doesn't like it. He said it's not his cup of tea, yet he won't step forward and ban it. How can it be that he can wave his personal wand and organise a rugby team, he can wave the same wand and organise a racetrack at Burswood that nobody wants, but he won't step up and ban bare-knuckle fighting? The Premier needs to act, and he needs to act now.
You
So you don't want your son aspiring to be a bare knuckle fighter?
No.
What's the difference having a piece of padding on your knuckles and not?
Well, there's a piece of padding on your knuckles for a start.
That makes it less violent?
Well, it does. Clearly it does. I mean, this is, by its very name, bare knuckle fighting. And some of the suggestions that we heard in Parliament from the Premier about, oh, if you don't have it as an organised event, it'll drive it underground. We don't want any violence to be promoted in our community, and we certainly don't want this style of violence to be promoted in our community. And what's he going to legalise next for fear of driving it underground? Is he going to say that drug use should be promoted because otherwise it'll be driven underground? It was a ludicrous argument from the Premier. He clearly hasn't thought this through. He needs to just step forward, have a strong position and say, righto, that's it. I am going to use my powers as the Premier of Western Australia to ban this sport. It is not wanted here in WA.
Is there an inconsistency with a government that outlaws mangs, outlaws vapes, is restricting the ownership of guns, and yet doesn't like bare knuckle fighting but won't do anything about it?
Yeah, and you have to
lift a finger to do anything.
And you have to ask the question, why has their strong position in some areas not being matched in this area? It beggars belief. Actually, it's almost impossible to comprehend, especially when, as I say, we've heard ministers and the Premier himself say, I'm not a fan, it's not my cup of tea. Well, just step forward and stop it. Otherwise, what sort of mixed message is this state government sending to our community? Some things are okay, but other things are not, and we'll champion those that we're anti, but we'll let those other things just happen? It doesn't make any sense. Right now, this is the bare knuckle fighting, racetrack building government. Is that what they want to be known for? What about fixing our health system? What about the crumbling hospitals? And what about the overcrowded primary schools that are operating out of demountables? Where are the priorities for this Cook Labor government? Right now, they are all wrong.
Just on that, I mean, that issue of demountables is just, it seems to have got seriously worse over the years, the number of demountables in high schools. Why do you think they've failed to keep up?
Almost 20 primary schools around the community now operating from demountables with over 800 kids in their school community, and 3 operating with more than 1,000 kids in their school community, also having to use demountables, and teachers having to work during recess and lunch, libraries having to be used as classrooms, and the staff room having to be used as teaching areas, simply because this state government has not done the required planning. They like to harp back to the Barnett era. They need to remember they have been in power now. This is their 9th year in power. The only people that can be blamed for the lack of planning in our education system is the Cook Labor government. They have had long enough to plan, they have not done the required planning, and as a result our kids in many primary schools are being taught in community spaces that just aren't right for education purposes. Overcrowding does not lead to best education practices.
Demountables aren't new though. I mean, you probably were in demountables
Yep.
at Laureate Primary School
No.
in years 1 and 2.
That's absolutely correct. They're not new, but we're seeing more and more of them. This is a very prosperous state. This is a state that has a very good and sound financial position. With the right planning, demountables can be phased out and more permanent structures can go into their place. And clearly, if teachers are having to use the staff room, the library, and having to teach during recess and lunch, then we haven't covered the facilities that they require adequately. This state government can get on and build these facilities. They've got the money, but their priorities at the moment are on building a racetrack for $220 million at Burswood Park that people don't want. What about building more permanent infrastructure in our primary schools to get the kids out of the library, out of the staff room, out of demountables and into proper education spaces?
Just the prospect of the government increasing utility charges next month?
Well, again, you have to roll your eyes, don't you? You have to ask, what are the priorities of this Cook Labor government? Our hospitals are crumbling, our education spaces are overcrowding, and yet their priority is to increase fees and charges at the very same time that they are building a racetrack in Burswood that had no community consultation, no demand and no transparency around it.
It would be cynical though, wouldn't it, for them to if they were going to do that, to increase utility charges when they made a lot before the election of cost of living and the last couple of years of keeping them down.
Yeah, well that is precisely right. So we have a government who made a lot of noise in the lead up to the election about their efforts around cost of living, about trying to reduce the burden on everyday West Australians. And yet at the very first opportunity, the first budget after that election, we hear that they are going to raise fees and charges, that your water bills are going to go up, your power bills are going to go up, there's not going to be an electricity credit, and at the very same time, they're going to build a $220 million racetrack at Burswood Park. Does that sound right to you?
State governments say they are focusing on the health system. Today they came out with 7.6 million for RSV vaccinations. What's your response to that?
Yeah, my response to that is it is welcomed, and that is a continuation for next year of a program that is operating now. To be perfectly honest, it would have been an announcement or would have been worthy of a press conference if they weren't going to continue doing it. It is a basic expectation of this prosperous community that those sorts of services are rolled out by the state government. I welcome it, but it's not something to celebrate. It's something that should be a given from this government for the community of Western Australia.
Woodside's northwest shelf will be governed by the federal government's safeguard mechanism, so they'll have to push towards net zero by 2050. Is that a good balance between environment and industry, or will it hamstring Woodside?
I think it's reasonable. We are proponents of the importance of gas in our energy mix. We know we have it in abundance in Western Australia and off the coast of Western Australia. It's important for Western Australian jobs that these projects go ahead. It's also very important for Western Australia's energy certainty, reliable and efficient energy. So we welcome it with the changes that have been made. And we hope now that they can get on with this project. It's been a long time coming. There's a lot of West Australians who will be involved in employment to get this done, and there'll be a lot of West Australians who will benefit from the energy certainty that will be produced as a result.
The federal Liberals are tossing up whether a net zero target is actually required. What are your thoughts?
Well, my view is that net zero is the aim. We know that. We understand that. There is nobody in the community that wants to see more fossil fuel than necessary burned. But we have to be sure that we can keep the lights on. And the Liberal National Alliance in Western Australia has a very, very strong commitment to advocating for reliable energy that means West Aussies can keep the lights on and know that when they flick the switch, the lights will be on. Renewables are wonderful. We want more renewables, but we can't just go to them without the certainty of knowing what's going to happen, especially in the hotter months of summer when demand skyrockets.
Trump's latest escalation in the tariff war, doubling Australian steel tariffs. The Premier suggested a SNAP summit. Do you think this is an appropriate response?
I haven't been invited to the SNAP summit, but I hope perhaps I might get an invitation as well to represent the Liberal Party of Western Australia and the many people who are Liberal Party supporters. Any discussions around the future certainty of our economic viability, I welcome. What I would urge, though, and caution, is talking too much is not necessarily what we need. Just getting on with the business of making Western Australia the energy powerhouse, or keeping us as the financial powerhouse that we have been, that should always be our aim. However, I do understand if getting relevant experts together, getting their advice, is something that can help us maintain our competitive edge, then I welcome that. I wonder whether this is something that necessarily needs to be publicised and splashed through the pages of the newspaper, or is it something that the Premier should just be getting on and doing as a part of the daily course of business that the Premier should be focusing on?